celebrating the power of possibility.
I'm Ed Hooper, and I believe anything is possible.
Welcome to Anything is Possible. I'm Halloran Hilton Hill. These are great stories about great people whose lives prove that anything is possible. And my guest today is Ed Hooper. Thank you for joining me.
Oh, thank you for asking.
You know what, Ed? I've always wondered this because you love history so much. Why? What is it about, you just come alive when you start talking about history, researching, writing. You've written several books, and I know history is core to your heart.
When I first got into the business and started covering news, everybody always did some sort of local feature segment, local history thing. And I grew up around so much of it here in East Tennessee that it's always sort of been a fascination, I guess, in a way. It's the backstory to what happens, the backstory to either murders or political intrigue or anything like that, stories you were covering. You had to know the history in order to understand what was going on in front of you.
So it really facilitates the storytelling.
Yes, because when you get on the air or you get into print writing, you've got to tell the story and you've got to be able to know why it's there, how did it come to this, that kind of thing. And it's just always been sort of an interest. I was always fascinated with history, even as a kid, ancient history, archaeology, and stuff like that. So when I got into doing journalism, editors, news directors, they would always come forward after a month or two and say, hey, can you start doing a little history feature or something for us on the local history of the mountains? And it just sort of evolved from there.
Where does your story start? Where were you born?
I was born at MacDill Air Force Base in Tampa, Florida.
Really?
I was born to Air Force officer, and then my dad, his people were from here. And they had got pushed out of the Smoky Mountains back in the 20s and stuff when all the hydroelectric projects and things began, and they moved to Knoxville. And so Dad enlisted when he was 15 into World War II, and then went from Army to Air Force, and that's when I was born, I guess when
did you move around a lot?
Not really. Dad waited till the end of his career, more or less, to have children. My father was like 40 years old, if you can imagine, when he had me and my brother. I had a twin brother. And so he retired like 3 or 4 years after that. So, but
what kind of guy was he?
Pardon?
What kind of guy was he?
Oh, he was a hard-nosed sergeant. We didn't wake up at the Hooper household. We fell out, student inspection. He got a job working as an engineer for Channel 10, and he was there up until the day he died. So he was, grew up on sort of a farm-like situation. So there were chores that had to be done. It was like.
Were you ever attracted to the military?
You believe it or not, not really. My father, who'd been in it his whole life, told me, he said, you wouldn't like it anyway. It's all rules and regulations. There's no action. This, of course, was in the 80s. And I'm like, okay, when the recruiters came around, I just had no interest in joining. And which is ironic because, I ended up covering it for all the years I've been in the business.
When did you decide on journalism and broadcasting and writing? When did you decide media was the way you were going to express your possibility?
Growing up in it, I guess, and I ran away from home when I was 17, dropped out of school, took off.
Why?
Because after Dad died, life just sort of, home life just sort of wasn't what it was. It sort of fell apart. And moved out to South Dakota, and then discovered out there, I got an opportunity later that year to write a column. And I was 17 years old at the time, and so I figured out real quick I was a better writer than I was a musician. So moved back home and graduated with my class, got my high school diploma, and went on to college and got into the business. And it was a different business back then than it is today.
How so?
I just think there were more rules and regulations as far as things we could and couldn't do. I did a radio show, Radio Appalachia, which I had on about 22 or 23 stations. And my first big journalism award was the Green Eyeshade Award I'd won for a feature series on musicians. Well, in order to afford to be able to go down and pick up the award, I did a commercial, I think it was Physicians Weight Loss. And that gave me the money to pay my way down to Atlanta, to go to the Green Eyeshade Banquet, get the award, come back, and I couldn't work for about 3 or 4 months after that because I violated the rule of doing the commercial and being in the news business. So,
there was kind of a wall between.
Oh, there was a big wall.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
Like,
There was
I
this
can't
huge
believe you
wall.
did that. And it's like it was the only way I could afford to go down and get the journalism award was to do the TV commercial.
So you had to breach the journalism ethics to get the
Yeah,
award for journalism.
Yeah, and that was a pretty good experience, and I just stayed with it, And I mean, I was still doing my syndicated radio, but that was just a question where you're out hustling up your own advertisers and stuff to pay for it. So
Let's take a break. When we come back, I want to talk about your journey, because this journey that you've been on has been one where you've been in the media, you have been of the media, but you also have been managing relationships in your life, and you've been through ups and downs, good, bad.
Just life.
And you have also done something for us in East Tennessee that I think is incredible. You have preserved a lot of our history in the books that you've written, and I want to talk about that. My guest is Ed Hooper. You're watching Anything is Possible.
Possibility powered by Pilot Flying J, Covenant Health, Home Federal, and the Knoxville News Sentinel. Coming up.
and moved back out to the country with Mom, with family property. They gave her 6 months, it turned into 4 years.
So you decide on moving into this career in journalism and broadcasting. What was your first job in broadcasting?
I was a traffic reporter for K-Trans. Sit there and, I started out with, I think we had 5 stations, and we built that up to where we were hitting like 15 or 20 stations at a time. So, and then I went from there to news directing at WNOX when it was in Jefferson City. And that's where I met Dave Young, and that sort of started
Dave Young.
Yeah, that started a lifelong sort of fascination with radio history. And then from there, just, I think back to K-Trans and then over to Z93 and up to television.
Talk about your years in television.
It was pretty interesting. I went into Channel 8, 1992, stayed with them until 1996. That's where I got my first taste of doing long-form journalism, the feature series, the sweep series they come out with. It usually was February and May, the July book, and then, of course, I think it's the November book. And then that's where I started working with long-form, and that's where I fell in love, was being able to go out, because usually you only had like 60 seconds or something to get a story out, and you can't really tell a story in 60 seconds sometimes. And being able to do the feature series, I just sort of fell in love with that kind of journalism, ended up doing the Tennessee Bicentennial program. I think it was Bicentennial Moments. I did that for them for about 3 years, and then moved on into newspaper. And that was probably the most interesting, was usually it's done in reverse. You start in newspaper and you graduate to broadcasting. I was in broadcasting and graduated to newspaper.
So what led you to writing books, and how many books have you written?
I've authored, I think 5 books for Arcadia, and then another one for Publish America, and those have been the ones that have probably got the most, I've done the most as far as preserving history and everything of that nature.
What are the titles of the books that you've written?
Knoxville, which is still the best seller of all of them. I've got Knoxville in World War II, Knoxville in Vietnam, a history of WIVK, history of WNOX.
I think the work that you've done is incredible. You were in the middle of all of this doing, whether it was radio or TV or newspaper, and then you shut it all down.
Yeah.
You have been one of my go-to people. When I want to know some history stuff, we'll call you in a heartbeat. And by the way, thank you for always being a heartbeat away. But you shut it all down.
I had to. My mom had
What happened?
My mom had got into a situation where anytime it got dark, she was calling an ambulance to come and get her. She was sort of freaking out with everything. And so they finally called me and said, look, Ed, you're gonna have to come pick your mom up from the hospital. This had been the 3rd or 4th time. And I go down and talk to the doctor, and they told me she's got 6 months to live. She's got Alzheimer's disease. There's a host of other medical issues we're dealing with here. They're age-related. And, you need to take a look, at putting her in a nursing home. And my father was so much older than my mother. He'd told me when I was a kid, look after your mom. That was his common mantra. And I'd promised Mom, I wouldn't put her in a nursing home. And my sister and my brother had both passed. So I took her over the next couple of months to 3 other doctors to get other opinions. And it kept coming back the same way. So I decided, okay, I'd given my word, so I just quit everything, dropped everything I did, and moved back out to the country with Mom, with family property, and to see her through the last, sort of walk her home, if you will. And that was, I gave her 6 months, it turned into 4 years. So, and that was just simply changing up some things in her lifestyle. But it was, like I said, the last few months was probably the most brutal part of it, because Alzheimer's is just an ugly disease to deal with.
If you were writing the headline for the last 4 years, what's that?
The headline what? On my life? On what? I don't know what I would write. I mean, it was a learning.
What don't we know about Alzheimer's? What?
It's brutal. I mean, forgetting how to do basic things. In the end, she couldn't swallow. It's like she'd forgot how. And it was just seeing the mind go away like it did with her was probably the hardest thing to do, because Mom had always been real big in church. She'd always been real big in the community. And people loved her. People, came to her when they had problems. And it was just hard to see that disappear, just to see that light slowly extinguish. And it got to the point to where it was maddening. If it hadn't been for the acreage where I could raise gardens, keep bees, and do all that, I would have gone completely insane.
Does she remember you?
No, not really. And I never was my mom's favorite child anyway. I mean, I always laughed at the irony of that. I loved her to death. I mean, it's your mom, man. But in the end, no, but it's just, that was a hard thing, I guess, to look at. She didn't know who she was looking at. It was just a presence, I guess, to her. She wouldn't dare call my name anymore, because I think she probably couldn't remember if it was me or not.
You said you had a twin brother.
Yes.
Tell me about your brother.
Oh, Mac, I loved Mac. He was like, we were completely fraternal, but he was 6'8", blood clot and scar tissue, but he was my twin. I mean, you grow up with him, that was the hardest loss I think I ever had.
When did that happen and how?
2008, 2009, February 20th. I got called down to UT Hospital, and she didn't know what was wrong with him. He'd come down with some sort of flu or something of that nature, and went down to see him and walked in, said, how you doing? He raised his finger, everything was cool. They'd got everything down to where it was just like he'd had a little bit of distress. And then I said, okay, you just do what they tell you. I'm gonna go run, fix a sandwich, because I've been working and I'll be back. And so I go to the house and I'm sitting there fixing the sandwich and get the call that he's crashed. And so I race back down there, to see what's going on. And God love him, Norm Majors was standing there at the time. He was at UT Hospital, and I thought, oh no. I knew it was bad, and I saw him. And then about an hour or so later, the doctor came out and told me he's gone. And they never did really give me a straight answer on it. I assumed it was some sort of staph infection. Mac worked on hot tubs, swimming pools. I mean, he was around a lot of, warm, moist areas. It could have been something like that. I never did. It was just, I was in shock for months after that.
So I'm looking at this, kind of the loss and the lessons from the loss in your life. Your dad,
yeah, well,
early on, and then your brother.
My sister in 2002 from juvenile diabetes, from diabetes complications to it. So. And
then your mom.
Yeah.
Where does that leave you?
I don't really care. You can drop me in Potter's Field for all I'm concerned. My family's tucked away. That's the only way I could look at it. I never thought I would be, I would lose my entire nuclear family like that. That's been sort of I'm not going to call it a cherry on top, because there's nothing really pleasant about it. I've never had to deal with it. We're coming up on Easter, which was always a big family holiday, and then that's going to be sort of hard, to get used to, because there's no mom, there's no dad, there's no brother, there's no sister, so, and it's just, it's something that I know is coming. I guess I'll just deal with it as it gets here.
I guess that's what life is, isn't it?
Yeah, pretty much. You just take it as it comes and see what you can do.
My guest is Ed Hooper. You're watching Anything is Possible. What has life taught you, from your career to your personal life? It seems like life is writing you.
Well, it's keep your eyes open, watch who you trust, and just, believe in yourself sometimes. Don't get into a situation where you're listening to the wrong people.
How did you come on that life lesson where you go, hey, you gotta keep your eyes wide open?
Many times.
Did the business teach you
Well,
that?
the business, life in general, yeah, because one of the big things I think in my life was back in the 90s, I came across a story of a Buffalo soldier named George Jordan. He's from Tennessee. He's our only Black Medal of Honor recipient. And I found an author who'd written books on him, Frank Schubert. And I called up Frank and I said, is there any place where I can go get some pictures of artifacts and something like that? He said, no, there's nothing. He said, that's just all we've got are government papers and the picture. It's just one picture of this whole regiment with him. And I didn't know that I would spend the next 20 years looking. Anytime I got a chance, I was going through auction catalogs, but I was so stubborn. There was no way you can give 30 years of your life to anything and not leave something behind. I didn't believe that. And sure enough, we found it, a couple years ago. Finally, actually ran across his actual Medal of Honor. And was,
Really?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And so I was sitting there.
So tell me a story.
Sergeant George Jordan, he was born in Williamson County, 1847. He joined the Army right after Andrew Johnson created the all-black units, and he got shipped to the West as a Buffalo soldier in the cavalry. Served for 30 years, moved up to first sergeant. He never had stripes removed, everything, so he must have been just a model soldier. And he never lived outside that until he retired and moved to this little village outside in Nebraska. And then he passed away. Well, he didn't have any kin, so what happened was everybody put his stuff in a barrel, and they sent it to the fort, who then auctioned it for $1 to some spinsters, teachers. And that's where we found, and here I was looking for it, and then I got a call because every time I got a chance, I don't care if it was a newspaper, if it was on radio doing those little bicentennial moments or history moments, I'd always do the story of George Jordan, thinking hopefully somebody out there is going to hear this one day. And sure enough, I learned to stay stubborn, stay with it. And he called me, and we came up with the old-fashioned picture and, bowl, that they had back then. And the Medal of Honor that they had been hanging on a Christmas tree as an ornament. They didn't know what they had. And so was able to get it away from her, get it cleaned up, looked at, and then shipped it on to the Smithsonian before anybody knew it was gone, because that's where it belonged. I mean, he had both the highest decorations you could earn. And his death actually changed the way the Army dealt with decorated soldiers or with black soldiers in general as medical.
How so?
He died of neglect. They wouldn't let him on the post because he was black. Wow. They wanted to send him back to the rest home in D.C. And what happened was the command at the fort then, they blew a cork when he passed away, basically, and the doctor was honest. He was basically for, lack of his neglect and lack of want or whatever. And so that got the head of the military at the time to issue a directive that all soldiers, regardless of race, will be treated at base hospitals, period. You can't ship them off. And so his death sort of, started that.
Can you imagine that? Can you imagine giving your life in service to your country?
Well, that's what made me so stubborn to find something about his life, is I wanted to have something that, you can look at and see that was of him or that was part of him other than a picture, and found that. And it was touching that a bunch of kids over in Williamson County heard the story, and they went and lobbied over there to get the county commission to change the rules, or the school board to change the rules, so they could name a school after an individual, and they named it George Jordan High School, or George Jordan School. And I thought, that to me was probably one of the most fulfilling things I'd ever had happen in a career, because the only bio information they pretty much had was from me or was from Frank Schubert. He just sort of vanished into the past. I mean, he was up against Victorio and some of the Apache chiefs that were just these great tacticians. I mean, you know, people want to put that down sometimes, but you got to remember at one time we had 40% of the standing army out looking for 14 Apaches. Well, George Jordan was in all that, you know. So it's just a great piece of Americana.
Sounds like a great movie, actually.
It is, it is. I think if anybody had ever done and there has been a couple movies on Buffalo Soldiers, but to do one on George Jordan, oh, that would make a great movie.
Maybe one day. You know what, I'm always looking for the possibility, and you taught me something very powerful today.
What's that?
I wrote the headline while we were talking. If you want to realize the possibility of your life or of life, stay stubborn, keep going.
I would say that works in 99% of things.
Because that's what I see. You've had to power through so many personal things in your life, and your unwillingness to quit and your decision to keep going, whether it be personal or professional, seems like the recipe for possibility to me.
Let's hope. I mean, I always wanted to be the best at what I did. I didn't care what it was. I had one of those fathers who's probably like yours. You know, I don't care if you're a ditch digger. Be the best ditch digger you can possibly be. And so that was the way I wanted to do this. I just wanted to be good at what I did, you know.
I think I was just looking up in the balcony. You got some people up there that believe that you're doing the best you can. And thank you for being here as an example of possibility.
Thank you.